Seats aren't available for non-family, so you'll have to stand. When I went to a restaurant to celebrate my grandson Eric's milestone, I found there wasn't a seat for me in the designated room. As I exchanged glances with the relatives who arrived at the same time, Olivia, the wife of my eldest son Jacob, threw a shocking statement at me. I felt a rush of anger, but a tap on the shoulder from my brother Patrick calmed me down. I said, "I guess we should head home then," and to my surprise, everyone immediately responded with yes to my question. We made a U-turn on the spot. Despite hearing shouts and the loud noise of breaking dishes behind us, I ignored them and headed home, where I immediately took a certain action. My name is Kelly. I'm a 51-year-old office worker for a company that runs multiple restaurants. Although I'm officially listed as a store advisor, I mostly work from home. This is partly because I was born with a handicap in one leg. I don't use a wheelchair, but I can't walk without a cane, making me hesitant to go to crowded downtown areas or use public transportation. Embarrassingly, I don't visit the restaurants my company operates very often. Of course, I know this isn't good, but since losing my husband Jack suddenly to illness 3 years ago, my life has felt empty. Now I live alone in a smaller condo arranged for me by my brother Patrick. I gave the condo where I lived with Jack to my married son and his wife about 2 years ago. Some people ask if I'm lonely, but when weighing the freedom of being alone against the loneliness, the appeal of living freely wins out. Part of this is because my relationship with my son's wife Olivia is terrible. Olivia is 10 years younger than my son Jacob, currently 25. She is stylish, beautiful, and was popular as a college student model while attending a prestigious university. I've heard she appeared on TV several times. She was expected to become a news reporter with the title of Miss University, but she got pregnant with Jacob's child during the summer of her junior year, and they had a shotgun wedding. At first, she took a leave of absence from college with plans to return after giving birth, but she suffered from severe morning sickness and her health got worse. Olivia worried that her beauty would be ruined and threw a tantrum, saying, "I don't want to be seen in public looking like this," and dropped out of college. At the same time, she became irritable over her uncontrollable physical condition and started behaving hysterically towards my son Jacob. "Mom, please, no matter what I do, thinking it's for the best," Olivia just screams and rejects everything. "The house is a mess, and it's bad for the baby's prenatal environment. I need your help," begged Jacob. So my husband and I decided to live with our son and his wife in the large condominium we had bought, intending to live there until we died. However, living together turned out to be challenging as Olivia treated me like a servant with her haughty attitude. "Don't dawdle, bring me my smoothie and crackers to bed quickly. Haven't I told you numerous times how sick I feel if I wake up with an empty stomach because of my morning sickness?" she would yell. And when she wasn't yelling about that, she'd scream, "Why are you washing my clothes with your old hag's clothes? No matter how expensive the fabric softener is, it won't keep the old hag smell from transferring to my clothes." Seeing enough, Jack would scold her firmly. Is it's common sense in this house to harass a pregnant woman? But she would just snap back. Even when Jack suggested that Jacob talk to her, Jacob would say, "It's impossible." Nothing makes sense to Olivia right now. "I wish you could just deal with it, Mom," laughing it off. As infuriating as it was, the fact that Olivia was pregnant made it so we had no choice but to endure her behavior. Had Jack been his usual self, perhaps he could have taken a firmer stand against Olivia and Jacob. But looking back, Jack's body was probably already being slowly ravaged by disease at that time. Olivia had cluttered Jack's study and living room, which should have been his places of relaxation after hard work, with her beauty devices, leaving no space to rest. Even trying to soak in the large bathtub we had ordered to relieve his fatigue was impossible. "Taking a bath with that old bugger gives me the chills. Just use the shower stall instead," she would say. I faced such verbal abuse Yet Jack would say, arguing with those two just tires me out more, deciding it was best to endure it himself. Seeing Jack's attitude, Olivia and Jacob, instead of reflecting, escalated their tyrannical behavior even further. As I busily managed the household chores, dragging my ailing leg around, they paid no mind. "I never want to end up like that disgraceful old hag, no matter how old I get," she said, insulting me to the visiting beautician while pointing at me. The beautician was at a loss for words at the sheer nastiness of their comments, but Olivia didn't care. "We really wanted to hire a younger servant, but you know how hard it is to find someone reliable these days, right? So we settled," she declared. Even as these words were spoken, I continued my chores in silence, my leg aching and my heart full of anger towards Olivia and Jacob. As these days went on, Olivia's due date arrived, and she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Holding his first grandson, named Eric, Jack teared up a bit when the tiny hand tightly grasped his finger. Seeing this, I nearly cried myself. The innocent smile of the baby made me want to wash away all resentments and negative feelings. But that thought was short-lived when suddenly I received news that Jack had collapsed at work. Panicked, I rushed to the hospital while trying to contact Jacob on his mobile phone, but it remained unread with no return call. Reluctantly, I asked the company to contact him on his work-issued mobile phone, but that too was in vain with no response. Hoping at least to let Jack see his grandson Eric, I contacted Olivia's mobile phone. I asked her to bring Eric to the hospital. "I'm in the middle of a hair treatment at the salon, so it's impossible," she laughed and refused. "Then I'll come to the salon to pick up Eric myself." Do you really think I didn't trust a baby to an old hag who can barely walk with a cane? With that, she hung up the phone. Still, I didn't give up and kept calling Olivia and Jacob's mobile phones. But in the midst of this, the operating room light went off. Then the doctor came out and informed me that Jack had just passed away. My memories of the time that followed are a complete blank. All I can recall is a hazy scene, as if viewed through frosted glass. After the funeral, which took place amid this haze, I came down with the flu. "Olivia, the baby might catch it, which would be terrible," she exclaimed dramatically and told me to leave the house immediately. Already emotionally damaged by Jack's sudden death and physically weakened by fever and cough, I had no energy left to argue with hysterical Olivia. Barely managing to get dressed, I left the room but collapsed in the elevator hall entrance. Thankfully, the concierge called an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital. According to the doctors, I was on the verge of pneumonia. Later, my brother, his wife, and my nephew heard about my condition and took care of everything. "There's no need to visit the hospital. She's been admitted, she's safe, and it would be terrible if the baby caught something," Jacob and Olivia said, not even bothering to visit. Outraged by their attitude, my nephew and his wife suggested I stay with them for a while instead of returning to the condo, where I'd just be exploited by Olivia again. Returning to the condo would mean resuming a servant-like existence before even regaining my strength. However, staying at my brother Patrick's house, where my sister-in-law's parents lived, was not an option due to infection prevention concerns. My nephew's offer was a welcome one. Deciding to accept their kind offer, I planned to first return to the condo to retrieve Jack's photos and personal items left behind. My nephew's wife, Helen, who was worried about the situation, decided to come with me. When we visited the condominium for the first time in about a month, we found it in a terrible state. What is this mess? Dirty glasses and dishes were piled up, and the garbage disposal was clogged. The living room was no different, with delivery food containers scattered everywhere. The bathrooms and bath were in a dire state as well. I wondered how they could raise a baby in such filth. As Helen and I stood there in disbelief, Olivia, apparently already drunk though it was just past 3:00 p.m., returned with a couple of friends. Noticing us standing in the living room turned into a garbage house, Olivia looked surprised for a moment, but then quickly put on her usual smirking face and said, "So you're finally back. Then get to cleaning this room right away." It got all messy because the old hag slacked off. Helen was furious at this brazen attitude. She quickly approached Olivia and said, "How dare you speak to Jacob's mom like that after all she has done for you? And you just kicked her out the moment she got the flu." But Olivia and her friends just laughed it off. Birds of a feather flock together. Friends of unreasonable people are unsurprisingly unreasonable themselves, they said. Then, as if they had a great idea, they added, "Why don't you just leave for good? This place is going to be Jacob's through inheritance anyway. The old hag can just go back to her parents' house." As Helen grew even angrier, I somehow remained calm. Considering their outrageous behavior so far, it was only a matter of time before Olivia and the others would try to drive me out. There was no reason for me to stay any longer with such unpleasant people, so I called Noah to ask for help, and we managed to move out all my personal belongings that had sentimental value that day. Still, when I looked back at the condominium for the last time, the memory of deciding this house would be where I'd die and Jack's smiling face when we made that decision brushed my heart. I'm sure Jack would understand this decision, I felt certain. After that, I moved into a condominium near my parents' home that Patrick had arranged for me and returned to my job, which had been on hold since before Jack passed away. I also adopted a rescue cat, which I couldn't have before due to Jack's allergy, and started living with it. Though Jacob and I work at the same company and see each other when I go to the office, we hardly ever talk. However, one day I received an unusual message from Jacob. Curious about the sudden contact, I read the message. It was about planning a milestone celebration for Eric at a restaurant this coming weekend. It seems Olivia has invited a large number of guests, including her parents, relatives, and friends. "The balance will be off if no one from our side of the family attends," he said, wanting to invite me and the relatives. "Why don't you ask Jack's side of the family then?" I suggested, but it seems they had already refused. Indeed, Jack's relatives live quite far away, and it's not a distance easily traveled back and forth. Moreover, today is already Friday, and there's hardly any time to prepare to leave the house. It's understandable that they refused. I was about to refuse again when Jacob, sensing my hesitation, said, "I'm sorry for everything that's happened. For Eric's sake, could you consider our request?" Though I was indeed angry with Jacob and Olivia, Eric himself is innocent. Remembering how happy Jack was about Eric's birth, I considered it. I didn't want to spoil the celebration. After hanging up and giving it some thought, I decided to attend and sent Jacob a message to let him know. On the day of the celebration, my brother and his wife, my nephew and his wife, my uncle and aunt, their children, and other relatives gathered in front of the restaurant. Helen said, "I'm here today, not for that couple, but for Kelly." While calming her down, we were led to the room, the largest in the restaurant, with low tables and chairs. This setup would be difficult for me with my mobility issues, so I asked the staff for a chair that was a bit taller. However, Olivia interrupted. "There's no extra seat, so just stand," she said loudly with her arms crossed. Seeing Olivia's smirking face, I felt more dumbfounded than angry, wondering how she could be so mean even now. Then, impulsively, I called out to my relatives, "Shall we go back home then?" Without hesitation, they all responded, "Yes." The guests on Olivia's side became unsettled by this. Olivia's parents came forward, apologizing to me and my brother and his wife, while hurriedly scolding Olivia. But Olivia, scolded in front of her relatives and acquaintances, became angry and started throwing anything she could get her hands on, like vases, framed pictures, and dishes. Screams, shouts, and the sound of things breaking filled the room, but we left without paying any further attention. Once the relatives and I had left the restaurant, Patrick and I decided to hold a strategy meeting in preparation for what was to come. The company where I, the late Jack, and Jacob worked was originally built by my grandfather. It's a family-owned business where our relatives own more than half of all shares, with my real brother Patrick currently serving as the CEO. Jack was Patrick's close friend since college and joined the company at Patrick's request after graduating. He married a woman who was a clerk there and had a son, Jacob. But after a long illness, his wife passed away when Jacob was in the 8th grade. Patrick, seeing Jack juggling work and home life alone, suggested I marry him, probably concerned about my future due to my disability and lack of social connections. Initially hesitant, I was swayed by Jack's words. "I'm a single father with a child, but I intend to take good care of you. Would you become part of our family?" Jacob, who became my stepson, neither showed hostility nor warmth towards me, his new stepmother. Believing it was unreasonable to expect more from Jacob so soon after losing his mom, I resolved to do my best as a stepmother when Jacob was about to graduate from college. "I want to work at the same company as Dad and Mom," Jacob said, which moved me to tears. However, this peaceful period ended when Jacob had a shotgun wedding with Olivia. After living with Olivia for a while, I couldn't ignore her domineering behavior and decided to have Jacob firmly speak to his wife. I waited for Jacob in the company's underground parking lot, but instead of seeing him alone, I saw Jacob with his arm around a married colleague, unaware I was standing just a pillar away. They were getting intimately close. The shock was enough, but then Jacob told the woman, "What if someone sees us here? We'd both get fired." She confidently replied, "I won't make such a mistake, and even if my affair gets exposed, the company can't fire me. After all, I'm the president's step-nephew." Unaware of my shocked state, Jacob continued, "My real mom was just a country girl, but my stepmother, even if just in name, is the company's executive vice president and the granddaughter of the founder. So she owns a significant share of the stocks and assets. When she passes, all of that will be mine." Then he drove off with the woman. Overwhelmed by what I had just heard, I returned home, unable to tell Jack. Replaying Jacob's words in my head, I gradually understood why Olivia always spoke so disdainfully of me and why Jacob never reprimanded her. It was as if peeling back layers to reveal the truth. Olivia likely received a similar explanation from the beginning of their marriage. I'm just a stepmother after all, and they believe I'm merely a tool they can treat however they please until they inherit the estate. Both Jacob and the grandchild yet to be born feel they are entitled to everything. But there's a truth neither Olivia nor Jacob understands. In reality, Jacob and I haven't gone through an adoption process. Legally, Jacob is nothing more than Jack's stepchild with no right to inherit my estate. Needless to say, for Patrick, being the CEO, Jacob is nothing more than a step-nephew, if even that. Recovering from the shock, I immediately consulted with Patrick, Noah, and Helen. Following their advice, I took steps at the City Hall to ensure no unauthorized adoption could take place. Additionally, in case of any eventuality, I arranged to entrust the management of my personal assets to a lawyer, a process that was nearly completed when Jack passed away. Jack's own estate, having been mostly spent on his first wife's illness, consisted of little more than savings and life insurance. I quickly renounced my inheritance. The reason the condominium wasn't discussed during the inheritance talks is because it was never part of the estate to begin with. It's frightening how greed can blind people. Jacob and Olivia, thinking the condominium was Jack's, probably rushed to kick me out after I renounced the inheritance. I backed down quietly, not just because I wasn't in the best of health, but also because I pitied young Eric and didn't want to disrupt his living situation drastically. But this time, I've reached my limit. I originally intended to file for an eviction due to illegal occupancy of the condominium during the milestone celebration, so I promptly began the process with my lawyer. Olivia's parents dragged her to the company to apologize. We were told by Olivia that we shouldn't visit because she needed to get along with the family of the person she married. that the birth and everything would be managed by Jacob's family since an heir is being born, and we took her word for it. We had no idea things had come to this. We're truly sorry. No sooner had they been let into the living room than they apologized over and over, but it was too late for regrets. Hearing the commotion, Jacob also came running. I had no idea my wife could be this unreasonable. I truly am sorry for what I've done to Mom, he said. But when Olivia started crying, he said to her, "We're getting a divorce. Take the kid and get out of that condominium." The look he gave me, almost growling, truly sent shivers down my spine. Seeing my reaction, Patrick looked at Jacob with a cold gaze and said, "You know that store is part of our company's chain, right? Considering the fuss you've made, you'll both be paying for the damages. As for you, stay home until you receive an official summons from the company." He then firmly kicked everyone out of the reception room. Afterward, Patrick began preparations to fire Jacob, consulting the company's legal advisor right after the milestone celebration incident. He was furious, saying, "Not only is Olivia's disgraceful behavior appalling, but Jacob's negligence in letting her run wild is just as bad. They even destroyed store fixtures and decor. Firing him is only natural, right?" Though he was initially adamant about firing him immediately, the other executives calmed him down, explaining that a disciplinary dismissal made in anger could disadvantage us in a lawsuit. So we turned to a law firm known for its capable lawyers. True to their reputation, they did an excellent job providing indisputable evidence that was more than sufficient to fire Jacob. 2 weeks later, Jacob, temporarily relieved from house arrest, was summoned to the head office meeting room, seemingly prepared for his dismissal. Perhaps he had gathered some inside information. Despite arriving with a lawyer, the sheer number of attendees overwhelmed him. As Patrick, sitting at the center of the board, began, "It goes without saying why we've called you here today. Your dismissal has been decided." Jacob braced himself, clenching his fists. "Mr. Jacob Miller, you are hereby dismissed." Patrick, acting as president, began reading the notice of dismissal to Jacob. His lawyer immediately objected. "My client admits to the troubles with his stepmother Kelly, but insists that connecting this to his dismissal is wrongful termination." A voice rose. Glancing at Jacob beside him, he seemed quite pleased, nodding in agreement. "There's no excuse for my ex-wife's rudeness at the recent milestone celebration, but that was a private matter. Isn't it wrong to fire me over it?" he argued. Then, conspicuously placing a voice recorder on the desk, he said, "I'm also prepared to report this as harassment to the media, if necessary," with a smug face. Hearing this, Patrick and the other executives remained silent. Jacob mistook their silence for victory. "You're aware of the public backlash against companies that violate compliance, right? Are you sure you want to fire me knowing what will happen?" he provoked further. At this point, Jacob's lawyer, not showing the expected signs of disturbance, but rather a hint of a smirk, seemed puzzled. Yet Jacob, ever so confident, failed to notice. Patrick then asked in a deeper voice than usual, "Oh, so you wish to continue working with us? That's a hard pass. However, if you wish for me to leave the company amicably, a certain amount of money as a settlement would be necessary," Jacob said, leaning forward on the desk with a smirk as if to challenge the surrounding executives. But in the next moment, laughter erupted spontaneously from everyone present. Some were even laughing so hard that tears formed at the corners of their eyes. Taken aback by their reaction, Jacob quickly turned red and began cursing foully. His lawyer frantically tried to calm him down. The dismissal notice naturally includes the reasons for dismissal. I'll explain them now, and if you have any objections, we can discuss them afterward, Patrick declared, his presence overpowering Jacob and his lawyer into silence. Both sat down. Then a group in dark suits stepped forward, bowed slightly, and turned on the electronic blackboard in the center of the meeting room. Immediately, the screen displayed screenshots of pages where wine exclusively imported for group participating restaurants was being sold on an online marketplace. Next, the screen showed an enlarged photo of the wine seller's icon. The moment it was displayed, Jacob stood up quickly. "This isn't me," he exclaimed in desperation, turning pale, and for good reason. The photo used for the icon was a cropped selfie of Jacob. The screen neatly displayed the original photos alongside an image match rate of 101% written in red. Facing the lawyer, still unable to grasp the situation, a man from the group of dark suits stepped forward, introducing himself as part of the law firm hired by the company. "Let me explain the reasons for the dismissal notice. The reasons include embezzlement, harassment, undue pressure within the workplace using his executive position, leaking confidential company information, unauthorized absences, tardiness, loafing, and damaging the company's reputation through inappropriate use of a company car," he explained smoothly. He further added that the company's legal and accounting departments had been secretly investigating rumors of the wine, supposed to be sold exclusively in stores, being traded online. In the process, they identified the source account and, collaborating with the police and other relevant parties, discovered that the account was linked to Jacob's online banking account. Additionally, the inventory management department uncovered the existence of double books. Upon questioning, several employees confessed that they had been coerced into participating in the illegal activities by Jacob, who implied they would be fired if they did not comply. As this explanation unfolded, Jacob was sweating profusely, but his complexion turned even paler at the next images displayed. It was a video, seemingly taken secretly with a mobile phone, capturing Jacob as he subjected female interns and temporary staff to sexual harassment and unbearable words. Jacob's lawyer, standing by, couldn't take his eyes off the repeating video, mouth agape. Next shown were images of customer information meant for our company being sold to a rival company, and a USB drive containing original recipes alongside an envelope bearing the name of the rival company's legal counsel. Seeing this, Jacob's face turned from pale to ashen, and his hands trembled on the desk. Our lawyer continued without hesitation, explaining why the USB was transferred from the rival company. Actually, suspicions about the source of this confidential information had arisen even before it was utilized. Upon rechecking the acquisition method, it was found that an employee of the rival company had obtained it from Mr. Jacob Miller in exchange for a significant amount of cash, he explained. The rival company quickly dealt with the involved employee and returned the data to us, along with documents clarifying the factual situation. Jacob's lawyer, taken aback by the continuous revelation of Jacob's misdeeds, listened in stunned silence. However, our lawyer concluded with, "While it might seem superfluous to mention now, all these illegal activities have already led to the filing of criminal complaints. Perhaps instead of discussing settlement money, you should be preparing for a criminal defense," he said with a chilling laugh. Jacob's lawyer turned red-faced. "I've heard nothing of this from my client. I cannot represent him under these circumstances. I resign," he exclaimed, glaring at Jacob before storming out of the room. Left alone, Jacob's initial bravado disappeared, and he slumped in his chair. Before he knew it, the women he had harassed in the video lined up in front of him. "We will be filing for damages as well," they firmly declared. Adding insult to injury, our lawyer continued, "Moreover, it has been confirmed through social media posts that you've been unfaithful with multiple women using company resources, even during work hours, and engaged in inappropriate actions in public. The company will, of course, include these actions in its claims for damages. So please be prepared for that," he stated, speaking pleasantly but with no smile in his eyes. Jacob finally collapsed from his chair, sitting on the floor in defeat. As Patrick and the lawyer had declared, Jacob was swiftly dismissed for misconduct. In the investigation that followed, Jacob, who was interrogated for embezzlement, tried to negotiate a settlement to avoid a prison sentence. However, finding a willing lawyer proved difficult, and he struggled to even pay the retainer fees. Eventually, he managed to cover the lawyer fees and compensation payments using the inheritance from his father, avoiding jail time for embezzlement. Yet, unable to prepare for the compensation claims for leaking confidential information, the emotional damages claimed by the women, and the defamation lawsuits, Jacob found himself buried in debt. Olivia, understandably furious at being quickly discarded by Jacob for his own protection, filed for asset division, damages, and child support. In a defiant stance, Jacob demanded, "Then let's have a DNA test for the child," prioritizing the investigation of paternity over financial concerns. Confidently agreeing, Olivia was shocked when the results showed the child wasn't Jacob's biological offspring. Investigations by a detective hired by Jacob revealed Olivia had multiple partners at the time of their shotgun marriage, one of whom was the biological father, disproving any parental relationship between Jacob and the child. However, legally, Eric was still considered Jacob's child. Knowing he couldn't escape from the obligation of child support, Jacob initiated mediation to confirm the absence of a parental relationship. While a lengthy resolution was expected, the public exposure of Olivia's turbulent private life in court was something her parents wanted to avoid at all costs, leading to an explosive reaction. "Stop bringing shame upon us. Enough with your antics," they demanded, forcing Olivia to withdraw all claims for asset division, damages, and child support. Then Olivia, for reasons known only to her, demanded of Zachary, "You're the father of this child, so you should acknowledge paternity and pay child support." The biological father of her child, Zachary, who was married, refused to acknowledge his responsibility. Zachary was afraid his wife would find out, so he offered to pay some child support. But Olivia was not satisfied. She took the child and confronted Zachary at his home while he was away. "Don't you think it's terrible that your child and mine, sharing the same father, aren't acknowledged and don't receive proper child support?" she boldly stated. Zachary's wife, caught off guard by this revelation and already dissatisfied with her husband, promptly divorced him. She transferred all desirable assets, including a new house, savings, and stocks, into her name before kicking Zachary out with nothing. Initially, Olivia smirked at Zachary's divorce, thinking she could be the next wife. But upon learning he had lost all his assets and was ousted from his father-in-law's company, becoming unemployed, she quickly withdrew. Despite the cause being his own infidelity, Zachary felt his happiness had been destroyed and blamed Olivia. "All of this is her fault," he said. Ever since then, he has been relentlessly pursuing Olivia wherever she hides. Terrified by his obsession, Olivia's parents, to avoid collateral damage, took in only their grandson Eric and disowned Olivia, kicking her out of their home. Left with nowhere to go and no one to turn to, Olivia resorted to night work to support Zachary, now a drunk and unemployed, as I was informed by a detective I had hired for a follow-up investigation. Meanwhile, Jacob, after all the trials had concluded, was left with a mountain of debt and alimony payments. A claim for me for the restoration costs of the condominium seemed to be the final blow. Trying to make a comeback proved futile as he couldn't find stable employment and resorted to juggling short-term jobs, inevitably falling behind on repayments. There was a time when he possibly couldn't afford a mobile phone and called from a public phone, pleading, "Please, I need help," but the call ended in silence after I remained quiet. Rumors suggest he was last seen being taken to a work site by barely legal debt collectors, but his whereabouts since then remain unknown. As for myself, taking this experience into account, I've become more actively involved in work. I used to think of myself as a decorative executive, a burden to my family, contributing nothing. However, during this ordeal, the company's female employees encouraged me. Even with accessible stores, its true usability can't be known without directly asking the users. Kelly, you could surely bridge that gap. Have more confidence in yourself. Getting more involved in on-site work made me realize I had become a pro at finding reasons for why I can't do this or that's impossible. Regretting not realizing this sooner, I'm now 51 with 9 years left until retirement. Rather than mourning the irretrievable past, I'm determined to make the most of these next 9 years. My current goal is to earn an extension of my retirement from Patrick and our relatives, and to report this achievement to Jack, who has passed away. I wasn't threatening anyone. I was really upset by what you and your friends did. I said I would forgive everything if you paid for a meal. So just leave your wallet and go. I realized later that your apology was fake. Both Olivia and Scott had that mocking look on their faces. They planned this from the start. We just sighed as we watched them rant. Just leave your wallet and go. You know what will happen if you talk, they said. Scott is higher up than Larry at work. I just smiled at their words. If they were going to be like that, I wasn't going to hold back. Are you sure about this? You'll regret it, I warned them. They thought I was joking and just laughed it off, saying they didn't care. I put my wallet on the table, and they thanked me mockingly, saying they'd give it to Larry later as a treat. Larry was furious, but I calmed him down and we left, ignoring them. Soon after, we took action and made sure they would regret their actions. I'm Laura. I live a peaceful life with my husband, Larry, and our son, Frank. Larry and I met in college and started talking more when we worked on group projects together. We shared hobbies and began dating soon after. We got married 5 years after graduating. A few years later, we had our son. Larry works in sales and is well respected at his company, though he had a tough start. He admires his father, who managed a company, and Larry wanted to follow in his footsteps in sales. I still get tough feedback, but I want to be like my dad. When Frank was born, my in-laws really helped us out. My mother-in-law went to cooking school and now works as a hostess at a famous restaurant. Her husband works with her, handling the business side. Their advice is always to do your best in whatever you're doing at that moment. I've always liked design. While working in administration, I used to draw for fun. This hobby became useful as I started taking freelance web design jobs. The projects got bigger over time. Then today, Larry came to me with an idea. Hey Laura, our company needs a designer. Want to try it? I really like your designs. It'll be busy, but I'll help you. What do you think? Your designs have a special warmth, he said. At first, I was unsure, but my father-in-law, who was visiting, agreed with Larry. With their encouragement, I decided to work on a design. Once I started, I was determined to do well. Larry and I worked together to come up with the best design. It took some time, but I finally made a design I was proud of. To my joy, they chose my design, and it sold really well. Larry and I were thrilled when we heard the news. We thanked my in-laws for their support, and they were as happy as if they had succeeded themselves. It's all thanks to your design, Laura, they said. It's really nothing. Having this experience means a lot. Thank you, I replied. This whole experience was a big moment for me. I started spending more time on web design, which was just a side job at first. Eventually, I made as much money from designing as I did from my day job. So I quit my administrative job and now work as a freelancer. Thanks to Larry's company, I also get to design whenever they launch a new product. Our son Frank, who is now in middle school, has grown into a smart and kind boy. He loves playing soccer for his school club. Life is good, but there's one thing that bothers me. It's about Olivia, whose son Kevin is in the same soccer club as Frank. Frank and Kevin are great friends, and they even ended up in the same class this year and often spend weekends together. Frank talks about Kevin a lot. Kevin came over to our house once and he was very polite. I was happy Frank had such a good friend. However, Olivia can be a bit too much sometimes. I first met her during the school's open house. It was obvious right away that she was Kevin's mom. "Kevin, you're definitely Mama's pride and joy," she said. "Mom, stop, it's embarrassing," Kevin replied. After the class, during the break, Olivia loudly exclaimed, making Kevin embarrassed. I thought she seemed like a loving mom, but that wasn't quite true. Really, Kevin is by far the best. The others just seemed to be playing around during their presentation, she said loudly. The room went quiet. Kevin looked annoyed and said, "Didn't I tell you to stop?" Everyone took their presentation seriously. I couldn't help but wonder if her comment was really appropriate. Soon after, the parents had to leave for another meeting and started to leave the classroom. "Frank, you did well in your presentation. You have club activities today, right?" I said, "Yeah." Frank replied, "Do your best. I'm going to make your favorite hamburger steak for dinner." "Really? Awesome," Frank said happily. Before leaving the classroom, Frank talked to me, and the other kids told him he was lucky to be getting hamburger steak for dinner. I felt relieved seeing Frank handle the situation smoothly. At the parent-teacher meeting, we could sit anywhere, so I chose a corner seat. That's when Olivia approached and started talking to me. "Aren't you Frank's mother?" she asked suddenly. I was surprised by her directness, but she sat down next to me anyway. "I wanted to meet you. I'm Olivia," she said. I felt a bit trapped but listened to her. I wondered how she knew I was Frank's mother since we hadn't met before. Seeing my confusion, she explained, "You were talking about dinner with Frank earlier, right?" That's how I knew. And calling hamburger steak a treat seems so laid back. I was taken aback by her comment about our dinner choice, especially since we just met. "Frank loves hamburger steak, and I don't think it's your place to comment," I replied. She seemed displeased with my response. "Well, that's true. My husband works at a major company, so he doesn't quite get the ordinary tastes," she said. When she asked where my husband worked, I didn't engage further and just brushed her off. Fortunately, the meeting started and we settled down. After the meeting, she asked if I wanted to grab some coffee. I tried to decline a few times, but she insisted, saying, "Come on, it's just some mom friends bonding. Besides, Kevin and Frank are good friends." I felt I had little choice and agreed. We exchanged contact information and went for coffee. During coffee, she talked a lot about her wealthy life and her husband. Since then, she invited me for coffee several times a month. Although our kids got along, I wasn't too happy about it but went along. One time when I declined, she hinted, "You know, my husband knows a lot of people, even Frank's club coach." It felt like a subtle threat, so I maintained the reluctant friendship with Olivia. What shocked me further was finding out that Olivia's husband worked at the same company as Larry. I nearly spit out my drink in surprise when I found out Olivia's husband worked at the same major company as Larry. She had mentioned it was a major company, but never specified which one. I hadn't thought it would be Larry's company. I learned this when Olivia came to pick up Kevin from our house today. Kevin had been over to play, and I had planned to just meet Olivia at the door, but she came inside since the kids were still there. "Isn't your husband working for XOAZ Corporation, Laura?" she asked. I nearly choked on my tea at her question. Seeing my shocked face, Olivia seemed pleased, and I had a bad feeling about where this was headed. "Why?" I asked. "Because I saw a business card in your room with your husband's name on it and recognized the company name," she explained. "Hold on, are you saying you just went into her room?" I asked, shocked. "No, I didn't mean to. I was just looking for the bathroom and happened to open the wrong door," she replied. I was relieved my sons weren't around to hear this. I had given Olivia directions to the restroom, so I truly thought she was lying, but I had only told her verbally, so I couldn't really push back too hard. Indeed, in Larry's room, he has business cards for work. I designed the business cards for Larry's company, so there are several different types, and he had some displayed under a desk protector. She must have seen those. Stunned and at a loss for words, Olivia approached and said, "I really don't like you too." Her previously friendly demeanor had vanished, and her eyes were now sharp and piercing as she glared at me. "Do you enjoy taking work away from other people's husbands?" she accused. "Excuse me," I replied, not understanding her implication. She threw out one last barb. "Well, whatever. Just remember, I'm gonna make sure you regret this." I was speechless and later recounted everything to Larry. "So Scott's wife is Laura's friend," he said, surprised. "It seems so. It must be a coincidence, but she seemed to have some sort of grudge against us," I said. "Who's this Scott guy?" I wondered aloud. Larry took a deep breath and started explaining. "I don't think it's right to talk about such things, but Scott works in the planning department. He's very assertive." Larry explained that the product planning department creates products and works with the sales team to make money. Scott is a key figure in planning and is known for strongly believing in meritocracy, meaning a lot depends on whether he is interested in something or not. Working with him can be great or terrible, people say. I still don't understand why Olivia dislikes us so much. "Yeah, I'm not sure either. I don't really know Scott well," I replied, sorry for dragging you into this mess. "It's okay, but what about Frank and Kevin? It's not good for the kids to be close if their parents are at odds," I said. "Yeah, I'll try to find out more," I promised. A few days later, Olivia called me. I felt anxious but answered. She sounded much more apologetic than before. "I'm so sorry about the other day. I was just stressed about my husband's work not going well," she explained. I listened because she sounded sincere. She apologized and suggested that since our husbands work together, we should try to get along. "How about we all go out for dinner?" she proposed. Considering her past behavior, I was hesitant but thought of our children's friendship and decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. "That's fine. Thank you. I'll arrange the place and let you know the details later," she said, sounding pleased as she ended the call. The day came, and we went to the restaurant Olivia had chosen, known for its seafood. However, Olivia and her husband were nowhere to be seen. I tried calling her. When I mentioned my name to the receptionist, the staff member looked concerned. I was shocked when the receptionist told us, "I'm sorry, but the reservation is only for 3 people." What? Larry and I were confused. What was going on? I asked the staff member to wait and immediately called Olivia. "Hello, Olivia. The restaurant just told me the reservation is for 3 people," I said. She laughed and told us to wait a moment. Soon, Olivia and a man walked in. Larry recognized him. "Scott, good to see you," he said. That's when I realized the man was Scott. Olivia and Scott were smiling broadly, which gave me a bad feeling. "I'm sorry, I made a mistake with the reservation," Olivia said casually, which annoyed me. Then she said something even more shocking. "Well, mistakes happen, but let's not waste the food, right?" "What are you getting at?" I asked. "Look, Larry, I'm soon going to be the head of the planning department. You're doing well in sales, but you're still a newbie. If you don't want things to go sour, you might want to listen to what I have to say," Scott said. "Are you threatening us?" I asked. "It's not a threat," Olivia interjected. "Laura and you have hurt me deeply. I'm offering you a way to make amends. Just leave your wallet and go." I realized then that the apology was indeed a lie. This was their intention from the start. We saw it as we watched them argue. "Look, just leave your wallet and get out. By the way, you do know what will happen if you tell anyone about this, right?" "Scott's higher up than Larry, after all," Olivia said. At that, I couldn't help but smile. If they're playing it that way, there's no need to hold back anymore. "All right, but are you guys sure about this? You're going to regret it," I said. They might have thought I was bluffing because the 3 burst into laughter. "Like we care," they said. I took out my wallet and placed it on the table. Seeing that, the 3 sneered at me. "We'll give Larry his wallet back later." "Thanks for the treat, then," Olivia said. Larry looked furious and clenched his fists, but I calmed him down and we left the room, ignoring the three. We quickly took action. They were the ones who were going to regret this. Yeah, can't let people who pull stunts like this go unpunished, I thought. Later, a call came in on my phone. Recognizing the number, I answered with a smile. "Ah, Laura, looks like we're almost done here," I said. I handed the phone to Larry. After a quick talk, he hung up. "Well, shall we go? Seems like things have heated up," Larry said, looking very upset. We went back to the restaurant Olivia had chosen. Once there, we asked a waiter to call the owner. Soon after, the landlady, who was also Larry's mom, hurried out. "Thank you for your help. I'm sorry for the trouble," I said. "It's fine. People like them need to be taught a lesson," she replied, looking as angry as Larry had been earlier. We were led to a room. As we opened the door slightly, a tense atmosphere was evident. Inside were Olivia, Scott, and some senior officials from Larry's company, including his father-in-law. Why had it come to this? The restaurant Olivia chose happened to be run by Larry's mom. We realized it as soon as Olivia told us to meet there. It was a coincidence, but since we were going there anyway, Larry decided to call his mom. It was revealed that Olivia had only booked for 3. We knew she hadn't made a reservation for 4, but played along anyway. Once we understood Olivia's intentions, we immediately reported it to Larry's mom. Being straightforward people, both Larry's mom and Larry reported it to his dad, which led to the current situation. "Scott, what's going on here?" a man asked Scott. "Well, Scott was flustered, understandably so. That man was Mr. Bryan from the planning department's top management. Next to him was someone from the sales department's upper echelon. I think my father-in-law might have called them over. He was the former CEO, so it's understandable how he'd react if he found out his family was being treated this way, especially in his wife's restaurant by employees from his time in charge. Actually, my father-in-law used to be the CEO of the company where Larry works. He's now retired and not involved in its management, but he was highly respected during his tenure. Even now, he's still in touch with company folks." After hearing the story from my mother-in-law, he immediately reached out to the company to explain the situation. When the CEO hears that one of his employees is trying to exploit another employee by using their position, he's going to take action. The 3 who didn't know this were surprised by the sudden appearance of the company executives at the restaurant. They seemed unable to grasp the situation. Larry said he wanted me to accept this invitation because my husband often works with Larry, even now. I was shocked by the clear lies coming out of their mouths. They showed no regret, and I wondered if they didn't realize that such obvious lies would eventually be exposed. Just then, to interrupt Scott, Larry entered the room. To the surprise of Olivia and Scott, Larry politely said, "Excuse me." Scott glared at Larry as soon as he saw him. We understood the situation completely, but for Olivia and Scott, it must have been confusing. Before Scott could respond, my father-in-law spoke up. "I'm the former CEO, Andrew. I'm retired now and have handed over the company to Mr. Bryan here," he explained. "By the way, Larry is my son, but he didn't get his job at the company through any connections of mine. In fact, I wasn't involved in his hiring at all. And I should mention that this restaurant is run by my wife." Hearing my father-in-law's explanation, Olivia and Scott seemed to finally understand the situation, and their faces turned white instantly. Olivia let out a sigh, almost without words, and Scott was shaking uncontrollably. Olivia, looking incredulous, seemed more flustered than I'd ever seen her. "Let's cut the small talk and discuss the matter at hand," said my father-in-law. The discussion, or rather the one-sided questioning they faced, started in a tense atmosphere, and Olivia and Scott struggled to speak. Olivia's issues with me apparently related to some design work at the company. It turned out that Olivia had also been considered for the same project. Initially, when the project was discussed at the company, My design was chosen after searching among friends and family for talented designers. This choice boosted Larry's reputation. Moreover, despite being relatively Brian, Larry had developed his own sales techniques, earning trust from his juniors and contributing to the company's performance. It frustrated me that he was taking credit for achievements that he accomplished with the help of his wife's talents. I truly believe Larry has been working hard, but didn't you feel the same when you got advice from him? This left Scott speechless, and a senior planning department executive made a sharp comment that added to his silence. Scott felt overlooked because whenever the sales department finished their tasks, they would give detailed advice to the planning team. This bothered Scott, making him feel like his products were overshadowed by Larry's. As Larry's answers continued to receive praise, Scott became resentful and often complained to Olivia. One day, Olivia overheard me talking about my work with some other moms. I love designing and often draw illustrations for school events like PTA meetings. Some of the moms knew I worked freelance, so when Olivia learned that I was the designer chosen for the company project, she started picking on me. Hearing this, we were speechless. We were honestly shocked that they would concoct such a scheme out of jealousy. Moreover, we learned another disturbing fact. I'm really disappointed in you. Please wait, I'm truly sorry about this, Scott pleaded, but Mr. Bryan coldly responded. I've heard from one of our planning department guys. I hope it's not true, but there's a significant amount of money being spent on planning. Is it really all going towards actual products? At this, Scott froze and Olivia turned pale. It turned out Scott had been embezzling funds under the guise of planning expenses. This revelation took even us by surprise. It seemed Olivia was also involved in the scheme. How did you get caught? You said it would be a secret, Olivia asked. I don't know, Scott responded, frustrated by Olivia's question. His expression was that of someone who had inadvertently admitted to embezzlement, but it was too late. Mr. Bryan sighed and bowed his head to his father-in-law. I'm really sorry. I never expected something like this to happen in the company that Mr. Andrew trusted me to run. It's my fault for not supervising better. No, it's not your fault, Mr. Bryan, or the fault of the senior sales and marketing staff, someone said. It's this couple who only know how to play dirty tricks. You both are going to pay for this. Hold on, she's the one to blame, one accused. Excuse me? Weren't you the one who said we could embezzle money? The other retorted. Hey, we're at a store. Keep it down, someone intervened. Shut up, if you hadn't interfered. How dare you act all high and mighty when you're the one at fault? Well, if the husband is like this, so is the wife. In the end, Mr. Bryan had the arguing couple handed over to the police. It was only right since they had embezzled money. It caused quite a scene and was a hassle for the store, but Larry's mom handled it gracefully, and the situation was quickly controlled. Larry told me that Scott got fired from the company and was sued for damages. They were very strict with him, probably because it involved the company's products. Kevin stayed with Olivia's parents for a while. After the incident, Olivia's parents came over to apologize. From what I heard, the couple is now living quietly, maybe as a way to make up for what they did. Seeing how sincere Olivia's parents seemed, I couldn't help but wonder how their daughter and son-in-law ended up this way. I was worried about Kevin, but the company made sure the incident stayed quiet. So thankfully, no rumors spread at school and Kevin was fine. It's unfortunate what happened to him. I talked to Frank the other day, and Kevin seems to be doing well at school. He's a good kid and everyone trusts him. Rather than being sad about his parents, he seems more upset with them. That's good to hear. I haven't seen Olivia and Scott since that incident. Kevin, however, still hangs out with Frank and even comes over to our place from time to time. Watching the three of them play so happily, I hope they never end up like their parents. By a stroke of luck, we were safe this time, but I truly believe that our daily actions attract the people and opportunities in our lives. I want to cherish my relationships with others more than ever.
My name is James Franco, and I'm just an ordinary office worker. My life is pretty boring, just going back and forth between work and home every day with nothing special to talk about. When I first started working, I dreamed of climbing the corporate ladder, but I'm not good at making calculated moves because of my personality. I often end up with jobs that nobody else wants to do. My inability to say no is my own enemy. Even though I work hard, I'm still a regular employee with no title to my name. However, there was a time when I used to be a lot happier and smiled more. I married my girlfriend, whom I had been dating since the start of my working life. We had a happy marriage, which motivated me to do well at my job, but that happy life didn't last long. Are you telling me to live on this meager amount this month again? A few years into our marriage, my inability to succeed at work frustrated my wife, and she often showed her irritation. I'm sorry, I do my best, I would say. How many years and how many times have you repeated those words? I thought marrying you would mean a better life, but with this low salary, we can't do anything. I'm fed up. My wife Rachel has always loved spending money on herself, from beauty treatments and cosmetics to nails, hair salons, and clothes. She was happiest when keeping herself beautiful. It seems she married me believing that life would be luxurious since I am a doctor's son. Indeed, my dad is a doctor and owns his own clinic. But my dad, who had a personality similar to mine, often sought his patients for almost charitable rates. He often provided care without profit for patients who were hesitant to seek treatment due to financial constraints. People can pay back when they recall it in the future as long as they are alive to do so. Money can't be made if you're not alive, my dad used to say. Because of this, despite being a doctor's family, we never lived a wealthy life. Of course, as a child, I never felt unhappy or questioned our way of living. I'm still proud of my dad to this day. However, Rachel decided to marry me because she thought being a doctor's son meant wealth, without knowing the real story. So our life turned out very different from what she had planned. A few years later, Rachel said, "I've had enough. If this is all we can do, there's no point in being with you. Let's get a divorce." A divorce? Hold on, please, I pleaded. How many years do you think I've waited? I age just as much as you do. I need to redo my life while I still can. I definitely don't want to be a low-income wife like you for the rest of my life. With those harsh words, Rachel left, leaving only the divorce papers behind. I was mad at myself for not realizing Rachel's true nature and for not being able to prove her wrong with my job performance. 6 years have passed since then. I threw myself into work to heal the emotional wounds, but being not savvy, I still couldn't achieve outstanding performance at work, remaining a regular employee. If this continues, what Rachel said would turn out to be true. I feel utterly miserable. During that time, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. It was from Rachel. What does she want now? I wondered. Inside the letter from my ex-wife, who I hadn't heard from in a long time, was a wedding invitation. It seems Rachel is remarrying someone else. Why would my ex-wife send me an invitation? I thought. As I looked at the postcard, puzzled, I noticed a familiar chapel name written on it. This place, isn't it a super luxurious hotel? Knowing Rachel, she must have chosen a rich man to be her partner this time as well. I could easily guess that she intended to flaunt her happiness in a luxurious hotel wedding, just to show the difference between her life now and the life she had with me. I don't owe her to attend. I mean, I was the one who got dumped, but maybe for Rachel too, me not succeeding in my job was an unexpected turn of events. After pondering for a while, I sighed deeply and stood up from my seat. This is the last time. I guess I'll just go. I knew attending the wedding would hurt my pride, but I decided to go anyway. Despite everything, Rachel stayed with me for several years. I can somewhat understand her desire to show me that she's finally happy as a form of revenge. From an outsider's perspective, she might seem too kind-hearted. On the day of the wedding, the weather was perfect. I arrived a bit earlier than planned and, while sipping my coffee in the lounge, stared blankly out the window. It was her second wedding, so I recognized a few of Rachel's friends who I had met before. Unexpectedly, I overheard a conversation from the seat next to me. "Rachel did an amazing job to get this wedding, didn't she?" one person said. "Yeah, it's in a luxury hotel this time. It's a level up from the first one," another replied. She used to complain that her first husband was a doctor's son, But when she found out he was just an ordinary office worker without money, it was really unexpected, wasn't it? Hearing them talk without realizing I was there, I felt a sharp pain in my heart. So Rachel never really liked me for who I was. I realized that when we got divorced, but hearing it from someone else made it even harder. Before she divorced her first husband, she had already set her sights on her current husband. They continued. Really well done, Rachel. Well calculated. I couldn't believe my ears. So, Rachel was already in a relationship with her current partner before she even divorced me. My pride was shattered to pieces. She looked down on me so much, but she was the one cheating. I started to regret even being there. Trying to maintain my composure, I took another sip of my coffee, but my hand was shaking. Rachel appeared in front of me, all prepared to move to the bridal room. You really came. You're really a good person, right? She said, sneering at me. Trying to hold back my anger, I responded, well, consider it my last duty. Glad you could find happiness. I forced a smile. Not liking my attitude, Rachel continued to belittle me. Isn't it wonderful? It's incomparable to the time with you. Here's a share of happiness for the poor bachelor. Be grateful, will you? She laughed sarcastically. Just then, a refreshing-looking man spoke to her from behind. It was the groom, her new husband. Rachel, it seems like the relatives have gathered. Let's hurry to the bridal room. Her husband Scott glanced at me briefly and gave a slight nod. I nodded back reflexively. Perhaps the groom didn't know Rachel had invited her ex-husband to the wedding. There's still some time before the ceremony, so please make yourself comfortable, Scott said with a pleasant smile as they were about to pass by me. At that moment, an older man following the groom spoke to me. Excuse me for asking, but may I have your name? Dad, what's wrong? Scott asked. Nothing, just curious, the older man replied. Feeling uneasy under the groom's dad's serious gaze, I responded, my name is James Franco. Franco? Is your father a doctor by any chance? The groom's dad suddenly seemed frantic. Staggering a bit under his intense presence, I nodded. Immediately, the color drained from his face, and he raised his voice. Scott, the wedding is off right now. What? What are you talking about, Dad? Scott exclaimed. Caught off guard by this unexpected turn of events, I hurriedly stood up from my seat. No, I didn't do anything, I said, still in a state of panic. The groom's dad began to prostrate himself at my feet. People around the venue started to murmur and stir. Dad, what are you doing? No, really, what? Scott urged his dad to lift his head, but he stayed bowed down, pressing his forehead to the floor. I was completely lost and had no idea what was going on. Rachel, caught in this embarrassing situation, turned red with anger and started to lash out. Can we just talk about this? Lift your head, please, I said, trying to calm the situation. I persuaded the groom's dad to lift his head, and he began to plead for forgiveness, tears in his eyes. I'm begging for your forgiveness. I've been unfaithful to Dr. Franco, he said. It seemed that the groom's dad, Gary, had some past connection with my dad. To understand the truth, I listened intently to Gary's words as he began to speak hesitantly. Gary was a fellow doctor like my dad. The story dates back to my early childhood when Gary was still a trainee doctor at the hospital where my dad had just started his own medical practice. My dad was known for his skills at a well-known university hospital. Gary, who was a student at the Associated Medical School, looked up to him. He volunteered to train at my dad's hospital and learn various techniques. One day, Gary's wife gave birth, but the baby was found to have a serious heart defect. The heart surgery needed was risky, and the chances of survival were slim, which made the other doctors hesitant to perform the operation. Desperate, Gary consulted my dad. My dad agreed to help and successfully performed the heart surgery, saving the baby's life. However, the medical expenses for the baby's condition were very high. Gary, being a trainee doctor at the time, couldn't afford to pay it all at once. With tears streaming down his face, he bowed deeply and asked my dad if he could repay the amount in installments. My dad just laughed and shook his head. Someday, when you become a great doctor and have the time to remember me, come back and repay me then. I guarantee you'll definitely become a great doctor, he said, to keep Gary from feeling too pressured. Sometime after, Gary was sent abroad to study medicine and didn't return to the States for several years. Despite this, he never forgot his promise to my dad and continued to save money for the repayment. However, by the time he came back to the States, my dad's hospital was no longer there. The contact information had changed and they had lost touch. Not being able to repay the money had always weighed heavily on his heart, and he had lived all those years without being able to do anything about it. Today, he happened to see me at the hotel and was shocked. He said I looked just like my dad used to. "I'm truly sorry. Please, I'm begging you, let me meet your dad in person and apologize to him," he said, feeling Gary's intense emotions. I responded calmly, "That sounds just like my dad, but he passed away 5 years ago from cancer." Hearing the news, Gary stood there in a daze. "No way," he whispered, shocked. "Yes," I said softly, "he passed away just like that. Until then, he had been moving from one clinic to another. He was a wonderful doctor, always considering his patients until the very end." Kneeling on the floor, Gary broke down in tears. "Dad, this isn't the place," Scott said, trying to calm his father. "That scar on your chest, that's proof that Dr. Franco saved your life." Scott seemed to lose his words. He looked at me, then back at his father, confused and emotional. "You're able to have a wedding ceremony and be here today all thanks to Dr. Franco," Gary said, his voice shaking. He bowed to me again. "I want to repay all the kindness I couldn't repay to your dad. Please, let me do something." I quickly lifted Gary's face and extended my hand to help him stand up. "Mr. Gary, I'm really happy. Just remembering my dad is enough for me. The life my dad saved is now able to celebrate such a wonderful day like today. Being able to see the proof of my dad's existence makes me happy. I'm sure my dad would be happy too." Hearing my words, Gary started crying out loud again. The onlookers began to cheer and applaud, moved by the emotional scene. Rachel was the only one glaring at me with a look of fury. As the time for the ceremony drew near, I stood to the side, watching the event unfold. I couldn't help but reflect on the day's surprising turn of events. Scott and Rachel continued with their preparations, but there was a noticeable tension in the air. Gary stayed close to me, his eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry for everything. Your dad was a great man, and I failed him by not finding him sooner," he said, his voice still shaking. "Mr. Gary," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "you didn't fail him. My dad helped you because he believed in kindness and compassion. He wouldn't want you to feel this way. Just knowing that you remember him and are grateful is enough." Gary nodded, trying to compose himself. "Your dad's legacy lives on in you," he said, attempting a smile. "He would be proud." The ceremony began, and I found a quiet corner to observe from. Rachel and Scott exchanged their vows, but I couldn't shake the feeling of disconnection from the event. My mind was flooded with memories of my dad, his dedication, and the values he instilled in me. As the ceremony concluded, guests mingled and congratulated the newlyweds. Gary approached me once more. "James, if there's anything I can ever do for you, please don't hesitate to ask. Your father saved my son, and I owe him everything." I smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mr. Gary. Just keep living with the same kindness my dad showed you. That's the best way to honor him." Rachel approached, her expression still cold. "Enjoying the show?" she asked sarcastically. I took a deep breath. "Rachel, I didn't come here to cause trouble. I came to pay my respects and to wish you well." She scoffed. "Well, mission accomplished. Now you can leave." I nodded, understanding her anger but feeling no need to respond further. As I turned to go, Scott stepped forward, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming, James. It means a lot." I shook his hand. "I wish you both the best. Take care of each other." Walking away from the venue, I felt a mix of emotions. The day had brought closure to some old wounds and opened my eyes to the enduring impact of my dad's kindness. It wasn't the outcome I expected, but it was a powerful reminder of the values that truly matter. I had an unexpected experience that changed my wounded heart into feelings of pride and happiness. Afterwards, Gary insisted on repaying the medical expenses and the kindness my dad had shown. He gave me a substantial amount of money that he had saved for my dad. Additionally, Gary's hospital started doing business with my company. This significantly boosted my performance at work, and I finally got promoted. The kindness and compassion my dad had shown came back to me in a wonderful way. I cherished this happiness while remembering the serious look in my dad's eyes when he was working. My dad's dedication to helping others had a lasting impact on me and on those he helped. His legacy was not only in the lives he saved but also in the values he instilled in me. As for Rachel, her second marriage didn't turn out as she had hoped. Her husband eventually found out that she had dated me before our divorce, and that her motivations for both her previous and current marriages were driven by money. Over time, he grew tired of her behavior, and this led to another divorce. I heard about it through the grapevine. It was a reminder that what goes around comes around. Living by my dad's example, I believe that even if something doesn't benefit me directly, it can still bring happiness to someone else. This belief guides my actions every day. Today, I saw someone smile, and just knowing I contributed to that happiness reassures me that my life is heading in the right direction. Reflecting on these events, I realized how much my dad's principles had influenced my life. His approach to helping others without expecting anything in return had come full circle. The money Gary gave me was a tangible reminder of my dad's generosity, but even more valuable was the recognition and respect his actions had earned. At work, my newfound success wasn't just about the promotion. It was about knowing that my dad's legacy had indirectly contributed to my achievements. Gary's hospital partnering with my company was more than a business deal. It was a testament to the long-lasting effects of kindness and integrity. Rachel's situation served as a contrasting lesson. Her focus on material gain led to temporary happiness, but ultimately resulted in loneliness and loss. It was a stark reminder that true happiness and fulfillment come from genuine connections and helping others, not from selfish pursuits. Every day, I strive to live by the values my dad taught me. I take pride in helping others, knowing that even small acts of kindness can have a profound impact. Seeing the smiles of those I help is more rewarding than any material gain. It reassures me that I am on the right path, one that my dad would be proud of. My journey from a wounded heart to a place of pride and happiness has been shaped by the lessons my dad imparted. His life was a beacon of compassion and selflessness, and I aim to follow in his footsteps. The unexpected twists and turns have only reinforced my belief in the power of kindness. As I move forward, I carry with me the memories of my dad's dedication and the impact he had on others. His legacy lives on not just in me but in everyone who experienced his kindness. Each day is an opportunity to honor his memory by continuing to spread happiness and support to those around me. In conclusion, the experience with Gary and the changes in my life have shown me the importance of living with integrity and compassion. My dad's influence continues to guide me, and I am committed to making a positive difference in the world, one act of kindness at a time.
One day at the hospital where I work, I ran into a friend of my mom's named Karen. She looked at me in surprise and said, "What are you doing here? You're out of place. If you're looking for a job, you won't find one. Go back home." Karen's comment shocked the doctors around us. They didn't know what to say. I thought, what is she talking about? I hope this doesn't turn into a big issue. It might be too late already. It seemed Karen didn't realize that making an enemy of me was not a good idea. I couldn't keep quiet anymore and confronted her. "Karen, you really don't hold back, do you? Or do you just not get it?" Looking confused, she answered, "Huh? What are you talking about?" "My name is Olivia. I'm 37 years old, a mother of an active 9-year-old daughter and a playful 2-year-old son. My husband, Jackson, who is 3 years younger than me, is a dedicated nurse at a general hospital. I used to work too, but since having our second child, I've been on maternity leave. We once lived in a small 3-bedroom apartment, but before our son was born, we moved into a second-hand house with a loan. It needs some work but could be a cozy home. It has a big garden for the kids to play in and a rooftop balcony with a calming view. The house is old, which adds to its charm, and my husband and I really like it. Near our house is a beautiful park where the kids can play all they want, and it's our little paradise on weekends. Late in my second pregnancy, I met a mom in that park who introduced herself as Karen. Since her daughter and mine are the same age and often play together, Karen and I became friends and had many conversations. Karen always wears bright designer clothes, and her daughter is dressed in well-known brands. When I found out Karen worked as a surgeon at a well-known hospital, I guessed it might be the same one where my husband Jackson works. Out of curiosity, I asked her about it, and to my surprise, she did work there. Excited by this coincidence, she said with sparkling eyes, "This is such a coincidence. I'd love to meet your husband." So we decided to invite her over for tea the next weekend. On the promised Sunday, Karen and her daughter came to our house. But as soon as she walked in, she started looking around suspiciously, as if she was searching for something. "This house feels old. Did you inherit it from your family?" she asked. "No," I replied. "We bought it secondhand and moved in just last year." "It is indeed old." As my husband spoke, Karen examined each piece of furniture as if she was evaluating its worth. We were taken aback by her rudeness. Meanwhile, the children played happily in the playroom, and only the adults were quietly enjoying tea in the living room. "Jackson, which department do you work in at the hospital?" Karen asked. "I work in the emergency department," Jackson said, a bit embarrassed. "But actually, I'm not a doctor, I'm a nurse. I support the doctors." "Really? You're a nurse?" she asked. "Yes, I graduated from medical school, but haven't passed the licensing exam yet. I plan to retake it next year." Karen's eyes widened, and she seemed to choose her words carefully. It's quite unusual to hear of someone graduating from medical school and not passing the licensing exam. Her next words made us uncomfortable. "Can a nurse's salary really support a family with children? Are you managing the mortgage payments and living expenses okay? Or is that why you chose an old secondhand house?" Her questions hurt us, and all we could do was give an erased smile. Karen made several more rude remarks, and we were speechless. After she left, I apologized to Jackson for the uncomfortable situation. "Jackson, I'm really sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable because of what Karen did. Maybe I should keep some distance from her from now on." "Don't worry about it," Jackson reassured me with a warm smile. "It was unexpected, but her personality certainly stands out. It's good to connect with other moms in the neighborhood, but I decided it would be best to not get too involved with Karen in the future." As time passed, new changes came to our family. I reached full term and safely gave birth to our second son. After celebrating his first birthday, I started to think about returning to work. Luckily, Jack's parents live nearby and have been a great help with the kids. Then, one day, I had some business at the hospital where my husband works. With some time before my meeting, I grabbed a hot coffee at the hospital cafe and was taking a moment to relax when I heard a familiar voice behind me. It was Karen. "Oh my, isn't that Olivia? It's been such a long time." "Hello, Karen. How have you been?" "Good. What brings you here today? Are you here to see Jackson? Maybe for a job interview or something?" It must be tough on just Jack's income, right? Her tone was sarcastic, and she had a smug look as she spoke. Wanting to avoid a troublesome conversation, I responded lightly, "Well, something like that." However, Karen continued to pry, looking me over. "This hospital has various stores, right? So where are you working part-time? At the convenience store or maybe the restaurant?" After a brief silence, I curtly replied, "Sorry, it's about time for my appointment." I quickly left the cafe and moved swiftly through the hospital. I took the elevator to the top floor. My destination was the director's office, where I had an important job consultation. After about an hour of discussion, I headed to the large auditorium of the university for my next appointment. There was an important announcement scheduled that afternoon with all the hospital staff gathered. On the way to the auditorium by chance, I ran into Jackson. "Jackson, that's great. After the director's talk, let's go for lunch together," I suggested. "Sounds good. It's a bit of a walk, but how about pasta?" he offered with a smile. "The pasta place behind the hospital sounds good. I haven't been there in a long time. I'm actually looking forward to it," I agreed happily. It had been a while since I had been to the hospital, so lunch with my husband was a rare treat. In the hallway to the auditorium, I ran into several doctors and engaged in brief conversations while exchanging greetings. Jackson moved ahead quickly, and I followed at a leisurely pace towards the passageway leading to the auditorium. I met some colleague doctors. "Olivia, it's really been a while, and I heard you had a child. Congratulations," they said warmly. Another doctor joined in. "Olivia, you were such a big help here. We've been in quite a stir since you left," he said with a laugh, hinting at their struggles. Then another asked with interest, "Is your turn imminent?" The reunion was comforting, filled with nostalgia and relief to see my colleagues well. But the atmosphere quickly changed when Karen appeared. "Olivia, why are you here?" Karen asked curiously. "Are you heading to the auditorium by any chance?" "Yes, that's right. I have some business," I responded modestly yet clearly, with several colleagues around. But Karen's questions grew more pressing. "But the gathering is only for doctors and nurses, right? Why would a part-timer be here?" she asked, not hiding her skepticism. Her remark brought silence to the corridor, a silence that felt heavy. "A part-time lady like her," a doctor muttered. "Is she okay?" Another murmured worriedly. I tried to ignore Karen's words, not wanting to stir up unnecessary trouble. However, Karen seemed only more provoked. "Why are you ignoring me? It's like you don't think at all." "You," Karen exclaimed with a sneer. "Lost your way? The auditorium isn't this way. If you're looking for part-time work, go the other direction. Now, please leave," she commanded, looking down on me. The doctors present were appalled by Karen's behavior, but they stood by me, trying to diffuse the situation. They raised their voices in unison against Karen. Disappointment and anger were evident on their faces, and their voices contained a strong sense of rejection toward her actions. "Hold on, what kind of way is that to speak to Olivia? Don't you have any manners? Apologize to her right now," they demanded, not just disapproving but reproaching Karen's conduct. The doctors gathered, looking tense, and confronted Karen. The atmosphere was charged with tension. Faced with a united front against her, Karen appeared confused and at a loss for words. What's going on?" "I just pointed out that she doesn't belong here. The meeting is only for relevant personnel, and she doesn't fit the bill, right?" She tried to justify her stance. But my patience had reached its limit. With a composed tone, but with content sharp as a blade, I addressed Karen. "Karen, you really are brave, aren't you? Or is it that you simply can't read the room?" I critiqued calmly. Unable to find a rebuttal, she stared back at me, perplexed. "How? What did you just say?" I calmly made my point clear. "You'll understand soon enough the consequences your actions and careless remarks could bring." The doctors around us showed no sympathy for Karen. "Look, your future here is now utterly uncertain," they told her sharply. "You might want to start looking for another job while you still can." They nodded to each other, clearly having cornered Karen, who was still unable to hide her panic and anger. "So why on earth are all of you defending this non-regular employee so much? I don't understand why you rate her so highly." She raised her voice. The conversation among the doctors echoed in the hallway. "Are you the new surgical specialist who joined last year?" one doctor asked her. "So that's why you don't know Olivia. That's quite pitiful," another added. Karen, with anger on her face and indignation in her tone, retorted, "What can you explain what you mean by that?" Her anger stemmed from the belief that judging people by their professional standing, regardless of their duties as a doctor, was against human dignity. The fact that someone with such values was in our workplace was deeply shocking to me, and I couldn't help but feel distrustful. Karen seemed unaware, but in fact, I was the very person she should respect the most. The other doctors completely ignored Karen's questions and left her with cold stares, quietly leaving the scene. "Well, Karen, we can talk more about this later. You may find my husband's position as a nurse pitiable, but no matter how hard you try, you can never be like Jackson. Besides, the fact that you find meaning in competing shows a great misunderstanding on your part. I said. Karen became flustered. Wait a minute, who on earth are you? You're not just a part-timer, are you? She raised her voice. I smiled secretly and replied, as I've already said, you'll come to understand shortly. With that, I hurried off toward the auditorium. As I entered, a large number of doctors had already gathered, and the director stood in front of the screen as most of the attendees had arrived. Everyone, thank you for gathering here during your busy schedules. Today, I would like to discuss the future direction of our hospital. He began and then proceeded to make an important announcement. Seeing Jackson in the crowd, he approached me and whispered, Olivia, good timing. I happened to overhear a bit earlier. Was there some trouble with Karen? Yes, she did point out something minor, but it's not a big deal. Interestingly, it seems she has misunderstood me for a part-time worker at this hospital. I replied, and Jack looked shocked. He responded, No way, Olivia as a part-timer. We couldn't help but laugh at how ridiculous the situation was. During this, the director finished explaining the annual business plan and moved on to an important personnel announcement. As you all know, our hospital has enough doctors and nurses. To further improve our medical services, we plan to start overseas training programs. The first training is scheduled in 3 months, and we will select 6 doctors and 6 nurses for it, he announced. This news was met with cheers from the doctors, and everyone was excited about the opportunity. Overseas training was a great chance to learn about the latest medical practices worldwide, and since it was the hospital's first initiative of its kind, everyone was thrilled. The director then said, Now, let's move on to announcing the selected 11. I remarked with a slight surprise, Look, the medical students have already been chosen. Jack listened silently next to me, waiting for the announcement to continue. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Karen. With her excellent clinical skills and remarkable treatment results, the director announced. There was no dispute in her selection. Surprisingly, Karen, who had just been in a conflict, was the first chosen as a trainee. The applause and cheers in the hall seemed to celebrate each accomplishment and effort. As Karen stepped forward, whispers of her notable achievements in medicine spread, highlighting her recognition among peers. The director continued with expectation. Now let's proceed with announcing the names of the rest who have been selected. A silence of mixed tension and anticipation fell as the names of the chosen 11 were called out one by one. Although Jack's name was not called this time, his expression showed no disappointment. He quietly watched with a sense of celebration as each selected individual stepped forward. Addressing the 11 lined up on stage, the director asked, Are all of you ready in spirit for the training? Please share a word about your enthusiasm and determination. He encouraged them gently. Each gave a brief but resolute speech, reaffirming their strong intentions. After everyone had spoken, it was finally Karen's turn. She spoke with proper decorum yet confidently. I am truly grateful for this training opportunity. I aim to help our hospital progress further with the advanced medical techniques I will learn abroad, she said with a polished greeting. Then she turned slowly towards where we were seated and continued in her assertive tone. However, this hospital has inexperienced nurses who continue to fail the national exam and bold individuals who try to attend medical conferences despite not being regular staff. I intend to improve and transform all these aspects. Karen's bold statement changed the mood in the room, and the looks directed at her turned cold. Her words brought out the hospital's tensions and showed how risky youthful overconfidence can be. The director's intense gaze seemed to freeze the room, adding gravity to the situation. Maintaining his calm, the director asked Karen, Karen, that comment was about those 2 sitting there, wasn't it? His smile was calm, but didn't reach his eyes. Confidently nodding, Karen replied, Yes, exactly. There are those unfit for this noble assembly. Remaining composed, the director then called out unexpectedly, Olivia, could you come forward, please? With this invitation, I, who had been just an observer, suddenly became the center of attention. Confused and beginning to lose her confidence, Karen asked, "Why her? Why are you calling her name?" The director, showing disappointment towards Karen, said in a quiet voice, "Karen, I am disappointed in you. Olivia, please introduce yourself to everyone." Taking a deep breath, I started, "Hello, everyone. It's been a while. I am Olivia, the chief of the medical department. I apologize for any inconvenience my maternity leave may have caused, but I will be resuming my duties next month. I look forward to working with you all again." Karen's voice couldn't hide her surprise. "Wait, she's the chief of the medical department." Her eyes searched the room for confirmation. Indeed, as the head of the medical team, I was about to return to my role. I had taken a 3-year parental leave to give birth to and raise my first son. The director, confirming the truth, added quietly, "By the way, Olivia is my daughter." His words rang clear in the room, clearly defining the situation. Karen's expression shifted from confusion to shock. Her mouth opens as if she wanted to object, but no words came out. The room, filled with hospital staff, couldn't hold back, and suppressed laughter spilled out at the unexpected turn of events. The director spoke in a relaxed tone, "Karen, for this upcoming overseas training, you have been assigned to be the team leader. Your deployment will be in a conflict zone in the Middle East. There is a shortage of both medication and medical equipment, and it's going to be very challenging. It will be interesting to see how well your skills hold up there. But don't worry, Olivia will be there to support you. Try to learn as much as you can under her guidance." Proud, Karen responded with dignity, "I am a doctor too. Although I have no experience working abroad, my clinical skills and treatment records are first class. I will not allow myself to be underestimated." I replied to Karen with a calm but firm voice, "Let me make one thing clear, Karen. In the near future, I am going to take over the directorship of this hospital from my father. Do you understand the weight of this fact?" Karen's expression stiffened. Seeing this, I continued, "Yes, it seems you understand well. Depending on my decision, your future in this hospital may be affected." Karen could no longer hide her agitation. "I haven't heard such a thing," she muttered. Jackson intervened calmly, adding quietly, "Karen, we had not informed you about that matter beforehand. Your disrespectful attitude towards Olivia may well be something you deeply regret in the future." Towards the end of the meeting, the director stated firmly, "Please, everyone, a bit of silence. Karen in the discussions here, in the end, results are everything. No matter how excellent you may be, that is just one aspect. What's important is the results you can achieve in this hospital, and on that front, I have great expectations of you." Karen fell silent at the director's words, bowed her head, and nodded without saying anything. The director concluded, "Today's meeting is adjourned." As his words ended, everyone in the auditorium stood up and returned to their respective places. Stepping out of the director's office leisurely, I casually said, "Shall we go for lunch? I've got a craving for pasta today." Side by side with Jackson, we left the meeting behind us. I started walking towards our favorite pasta place behind the hospital, leaving the building behind. As we were about to pass the small smoking area set up behind the hospital, I spotted Karen. She was deep in thought, taking a drag of her cigarette. When our eyes met, Karen awkwardly looked away. Just then, a loud crash caught our attention. A car had rear-ended another in an accident. Jack and I sprang into action immediately. The area was nearly deserted, so it was crucial for us to move quickly to help. "Are you okay?" Jack called out with concern and quickly checked on the people involved in the accident. One was the driver in the car that was hit, and another was a pedestrian who happened to be walking by. Karen also rushed to the accident scene, but seemed overwhelmed by the chaos. Acting on my medical instincts, I began to give directions. "Jackson, quickly get that man into a safe position and check his pulse," I instructed. Jack moved without wasting any time, following my instructions promptly. As an emergency nurse, Jack had received special training, including attending surgeries I conducted. I had trained him rigorously, which helped him develop exceptional practical skills compared to other nurses. I then directed Karen with calm and clarity. Karen, check if that elderly person is bleeding and assess their level of consciousness. However, Karen seemed paralyzed by the seriousness of the situation, standing still without moving. My voice grew firmer as I insisted, Karen, do you understand what I'm saying? Please respond quickly. Her voice was tense. Karen was clearly overwhelmed, and with an unstable voice, she replied, yes, what should I do? Her panic was evident and seemed to add to the confusion at the scene. I rebuked Karen firmly yet patiently. Don't you know what to do in an emergency? I doubt you're even a surgeon. Karen responded with what could be perceived as anger. That's not true. There's nothing I can't do. But her actions, though active, clearly lacked effective measures, and she was just bustling about the scene. I then looked to Jackson. Jackson, could you measure that elderly person's blood pressure and make sure there's no bleeding? I gave the orders calmly. Jackson promptly replied, understood, and began to manage the situation. The accident scene started to regain some order with our swift response. Jack spoke to Karen with unusual sternness. Karen, come over here and help. Karen reacted to Jack's command. What do you mean? A nurse asking for such a thing? She complained. But Jack cut her off. This is no place for someone who can't do anything. If you're not going to help in this critical moment where lives are at stake, please step back, he said decisively. Karen was at a loss for words and stepped back from the scene silently. Jackson assessed the situation and reported to me, the vitals are stable, but there might be internal damage. We should conduct a thorough examination as soon as possible. As professionals, we showed readiness to collaborate with other medical staff around us, doing our best for the patients. I led the response steadily. Let's begin the procedures then. And the driver over there seems disoriented, but I don't see any serious symptoms. Let's move him out of here. Karen, could you please call an ambulance on your cell phone? Despite my instructions, Karen stood frozen, unable to move. I addressed her with suspicion. Karen, I'm speaking to you. Do you hear me? Karen seemed confused, hesitantly murmuring, what's the number for the ambulance again? Jack intervened. Just give me that phone. He stepped in and took over, arranging for the ambulance. About 10 minutes later, police and fire department personnel arrived, and the once chaotic accident scene started to be sorted out gradually. People gathered, including doctors, department heads, medical students, and even professors. Without being disturbed by this, I spoke to Karen with calm and stern emphasis on the gravity of the situation. Karen, to be frank, your actions earlier were more of a hindrance than a help. What exactly can you say you've accomplished? I posed the direct question. Karen was silent, unable to answer. In the medical field, every minute, every second can determine the outcome. This is not a place to protect your ego, I continued. Karen's voice was barely audible as she apologized. I'm sorry. The crowd at the accident scene quietly observed their exchange, and the director himself was also present. Karen just seemed out of place and embarrassed. I continued, Karen, you've looked down on Jack as just a nurse, but the fact is, your positions are different. There's no meaning in comparing you and Jackson. He is one of the most competent nurses in this hospital. Can't you see now how powerless and insufficient your actions were in this situation? Karen stubbornly retorted, if I had more experience in emergency situations, I could handle it perfectly well. But Jack sensed the uncertainty behind her words and calmly pointed out her flaw. You're always driven by a desire to have your accomplishments recognized, but your actual skills in the field are still immature. You've just demonstrated that yourself, he asserted. He continued, you say you'll gain experience in emergency treatment in the future. But this moment is also a practical situation. Given your current state, it's unlikely you'll have further opportunities to experience the field in the future. Karen's confidence began to show cracks, and she seemed on the verge of tears, aware of the eyes around her. Yet the medical field, dealing with lives, demands proper judgment and strictness. Therefore, I had to make a tough decision that would impact Karen's future. Karen, I regret to say this, but your name will be removed from the Overseas Training Program candidate list, I declared. Karen was taken aback. What? I looked to the director for confirmation. Father, this decision is acceptable, correct? The director nodded deeply. No problem. This incident has given me a clear understanding of her capabilities. I have great expectations for Jack. We have always selected trainees based on their grades, but it may be necessary to reconsider our selection system in light of this. His quiet but firm response marked a complete defeat for Karen. With a calm but resolute voice, I advised Karen, it's important for you to relearn from the basics. Only then will you have the right to compete at the same level as Jack. Also, take to heart the dangers of judging a person's worth by their appearance. While I considered letting you go from the workplace, I have decided to give you one more chance, the last chance. Make the most of this opportunity and show us your full effort, I advised sternly yet justly. Afterward, they quietly left the scene, but the looks from the doctors around Karen were cold, filled with disappointment and disapproval. Their evaluation of her future was seemingly already set. Weeks passed, and the long-awaited departure day for the overseas training arrived. Jack and I headed to the airport, excited to acquire new knowledge and experience. I heard that Karen resigned from the hospital a month after the incident. She couldn't handle the cold stares from those around her and chose to put her pride first. Personally, I thought that was for the best. A doctor who prioritizes pride over everything else shouldn't be responsible for patients' lives, and no one would want to trust their life to such a person. On the way to the airport, I spoke to Jackson with hopeful words. Jackson, let's use our skills to make this hospital one of the most famous in the world. Sharing that passion and reaffirming his determination, Jackson replied, That's right. I need to work even harder and get my medical license as soon as possible. And so, I quietly made a promise to myself again, reaffirming my strong commitment as a doctor to fulfill my duties.